Chapter 40. The Intern. December 14th, 1999. My mother coughed so hard it damaged her vocal cords and caused her windpipe to swell. Dad took her to the emergency room where she was admitted. The plan was to give her oxygen, observe her for a day or two, and send her home. Carol and I visited her every day for 4 days and asked when she was coming home. No one seemed to have an answer. On the 5th day, Mom became restless and couldn't stop moving. She whispered to me, "If they don't tie me down, I'm going to jump right out of this bed." I thought it had to be RLS, restless leg syndrome. RLS, called Willis-Ekbom disease, is an unpleasant or uncomfortable sensation in the legs, causing an irresistible urge to move. It commonly occurs in the late afternoon or evenings, but is the most severe at night. It is a painless disease that inhibits the muscles from relaxing, preventing the body from falling asleep. It is a torturous chain of sensations creeping up and down the legs with total disregard for how exhausted the body has become. The second symptom of the disease is just as awful, causing severe anxiety, agitation, and hostility. Walking or moving relieves the RLS symptoms, but does not help with the anxiety. We asked the nurse to help get her out of bed so she could walk. However, when she stood up, her blood pressure dropped to 64/30, and she nearly passed out. Normal blood pressure is 120/80. Putting her back to bed, we noticed her abdomen was covered in bruises. The nurse told us they were giving her heparin injections. That didn't make sense. Why would they be giving her a blood thinner for her swollen windpipe? We were told one of her blood tests indicated she might have had a heart attack. We were never informed of this. Early the next morning, Carol and I were at the hospital to see the intern caring for her. An intern is a doctor who has graduated but doesn't have a license yet. He never showed up. Her primary care doctor, Dr. Chang, did not have privileges at that hospital, according to her insurance. She was so weak she couldn't feed herself. Carol and I went straight to Dr. Chang's office, which was across the street, and begged him to come see her. He came right away, took one look at her, and said, "She's bleeding out." One of her doctors ordered a CT scan of her abdomen, where they found 2 leaking blood vessels. They began giving her a blood transfusion. The doctor wanted to know who ordered the blood thinners and was told an intern had done it. A hospitalist who saw the blood work that suggested she might have had a heart attack ordered further testing and to monitor her. However, this in turn ordered blood thinners to be started. Further testing did not indicate she had had a heart attack. Mom began having bowel issues on top of everything else. She had always been very prim and proper, so this was extremely embarrassing. She'd put on her call light, but help didn't arrive in time. Seeing how upset this made her, the nurse told her not to worry. It was nothing to be ashamed of. "Just let it go, and we'll clean you up," the nurse said. Mom was transferred to the intensive care unit, where she went into renal failure. She was puffed up like a balloon. Even the whites of her eyes were swollen. The doctor took us aside and said she was not going to survive. We were told to file in 2 at a time to say our goodbyes. Dad and I were the last to enter. She was hooked up to several IVs, had a tube down her nose, and an oxygen mask on. She was so weak she could barely talk. When she saw Dad and me, she became restless. She was anxious to tell him something. She could only speak above a whisper, and he was hard of hearing. I could see tears in his eyes as he leaned in, but he couldn't understand her. Turning to me, he shook his head. I would have to deliver the message. We knew it was important. She had something to tell him, but she didn't have the energy to force out the words. Knowing this could possibly be the last words she would speak to the man she loved, I lifted her mask and leaned in as close as I could. Tears streamed down my face as she tilted her head to look my way. In a coarse whisper, she said, "Pay the visa bill. It's due today." Glancing off to the side, I had to stifle the laughter that so desperately wanted to escape my lips. This was just like Mom. She's on her deathbed, and the most important thing on her mind is making sure the visa bill gets paid. The afternoon ICU nurse was not as considerate as the other nurses on the floor. Just as I was coming in to visit, Mom finally got the nurse's attention and asked to be changed. The nurse appeared peeved and insisted, "Why didn't you put your call light on?" Her bristling response startled both of us, but Mom responded apologetically, "I didn't know where it was." Pointing to her bed rail, the nurse scolded, "It's right there." Her attitude upset both of us, so I asked her, "Have we done something to offend you?" She must have been taken aback by my question, but huffed, "I've already had a bad day, and I just don't understand why someone would deliberately soil their bed and not call me." I couldn't believe how she could compare her day to my mom's. "My mom almost died yesterday," I said, "so I doubt you've had a worse day than she's had. We're glad she can talk, let alone put on her call light." The nurse was indignant and walked out. Mom struggled as she told me this new nurse was mean. She wouldn't let her have any ice. When the nurse wasn't looking, I quickly gave her a few chips. Having eyes in the back of her head, the woman came back in and dumped all the containers. When the doctor came in a little later, I asked if he could order ice for Mom. When he left, Mom's caretaker reluctantly brought in a pitcher of it. I'm sure she didn't want to be there. None of us wanted to be there. It was Christmas Eve. When I came in to visit Mom the next day, she grabbed my hand and kept repeating, 14, 14. I pleaded, "Mom, I don't know what that means. Please tell me what you're trying to say." The nurse came in. I could tell she was somber as she told me I just asked her what her pain level was between 1 and 10. My heart broke. When I insisted they give her something for the pain, the nurse said they couldn't. Her blood pressure was too low. I went home that evening, got in the shower, and couldn't stop the flood of tears. She was only 84. All her family had lived into their 90s. She had a good 10 years left. When I came out, Russ could tell I'd been crying and gently said, "It's a little too early to fall apart, don't you think?" So every time I wanted to cry, I kept repeating to myself, "It's a little too early, don't you think?" The time in ICU seemed to have improved her situation, and she was moved to the cardiac care unit on New Year's Eve, Y2K. As it was referred to, Y2K was the night the world, as well as our family, held its breath as time rolled over from 1999 to 2000, a new millennium. It was anticipated that the hospital computers would suddenly crash, equipment would stop working, lights might go out, and who knew what else might happen. It was a moot point as time smoothly rolled over without a hitch. Within a few days, Mom's HMO doctors decided she was well enough to be released to English Oaks, a rehabilitation center. Physical therapy had her up and walking in the hallway. when they discovered a blood clot had developed in her leg. She was taken back to the hospital by ambulance. There were no beds available as the flu was rampant, so she was left in the ER. Standing at the foot of Mom's gurney, the male nurse wasn't very discreet. He told us they were keeping her in the ER because she wasn't going to survive. I was shocked by his insensitive remark. In my anger, I told him they'd better do an autopsy. There's no reason she shouldn't pull through. My statement was as painful as the nurse's. Jim was upset with me for my response. Later, I was also upset at myself. Mom held my hand and told me I could feel Jesus walking the hallway with me yesterday. Although she told us she wanted to live, I felt she was also at peace with going home to be with the Lord. They moved her to a holding area, a large, dimly lit room with curtains separating the beds and no nurse's station or medical personnel in attendance. The 7 of us were at her side: Dad, Carol, Jim, Carolyn, Peggy, Russ, and me. Not far from us was a man yelling obscenities at the top of his lungs, which echoed throughout the empty room. I was sickened as I wondered if this was the best they could do for my precious mother, who was at her death's door. Eventually, Mom was no longer coherent. We had been up all night and were exhausted. Everyone left except Peggy and me. Before Dad left to take a nap in his car, he asked me to come get him if anything changed. He always regretted being absent when his mother died, so he wanted to make sure he was there for Mom. There are many things I regretted. One of them was not asking Dad where he parked his car. The time seemed near, so I hurried out to find him. The parking lot was huge. It took a good 10 minutes before I found him. After waking him, I didn't wait around. I hurried back as fast as I could, arriving just as Mom exhaled her last breath. Peggy was the only one who stayed at Mom's side the entire time. Mom had already passed away when Dad arrived. He cried but never mentioned missing those final moments. That was January 4th, 2000. Mom loved the Lord, so we could only imagine the celebration she was having with her parents, other family members, and Stan. We are confident, I say, and would prefer to be away from the body and at home with the Lord. 2 Corinthians 5:8. My mother was a gentle, quiet woman. She was kind and thoughtful, doting over her children. It's sad that my grandchildren will never know how precious and sweet their Grandma Daub was. I felt her death was needless, and the way she suffered was heart-wrenching. I prayed I would never have to experience anything like that with any other family member. She will always be missed.